tell us what Rebel Streets is about?
Rebel Streets is a novel set in Northern Ireland at the height of the violence in Belfast. I lived in the Falls Road, which was a Catholic minority community in Belfast during the violence. And basically it's a novel of human frailty, betrayal, love, and redemption. And it is the story of a young IRA man who was tortured, brutally interrogated by the security forces. He breaks under the interrogation, and after days of interrogation and brutality and sleep deprivation, he turns informer and he betrays his comrades. And he is sent back into the Catholic ghetto in Belfast, into the Falls Road, where he rejoins his comrades in the IRA. And he is told by his handlers, his intelligence handlers on the British side, to just be himself. And he rejoins the operations, and as his unit goes into battle, he betrays his comrades one by one, and the book focuses on his struggle, his internal struggle with this betrayal, with this Judas-like betrayal, and he had broken under torture, and he despises himself for it, and he's trying to think of a way he can redeem himself, if he can somehow turn this to his advantage, but it's hopeless. And then he meets a young woman, Michaela Murphy, a young woman who lives in the Falls Road. They fall in love, and he faces a further dilemma of, should he tell this woman he loves who he is, what he's really done, how he has betrayed his cause and his country. And after a lot of soul searching and the struggles and the violence of the background, he decides he must tell her, and he does tell her, and that confession to her puts them both in danger, of course, and it sets in motion a series of events that lead quite quickly to the termination of the novel.
Are any of the characters inspired by people that you actually met?
The people in the book were, most of them are a conglomeration of various people I met there. The people I met in the Falls Road were some of the most impressive, most generous, courageous, and humorous people I ever met. Everybody was in the struggle. I was arrested a number of times over there by the British security forces, and they would always ask me, who's in the IRA? And I told them the truth. I said, everybody. Everybody's in the IRA. The little kids are in it, the old ladies are in it, everybody is in it, because everybody supports this cause. And so the people, it's a conglomeration of the characters I met, a little from each person here and there, and no one very specific.
Looking back on it now, what stands out in your mind about that period?
Several things. One thing that stands out about me is once this violence begins, because the struggle in Northern Ireland is very much misunderstood. When the struggle began, when the Catholic or the nationalist minority, when they stood up for their civil rights, when they stood up for better housing, for jobs, for just the basic human and civil rights that we take for granted, they modeled their movement after Martin Luther King. They modeled it after the American Civil Rights Movement, the American blacks. They marched non-violently. They were singing "We Shall Overcome," and they were met with incredible violence on the part of the police. They were bludgeoned. If you were to take a film of the civil rights marchers on that bridge in Alabama who were attacked by the Alabama state troopers, and put it side by side with the civil rights marchers in Northern Ireland who were attacked by the police, everything is the same. The only thing that is different is the color of the skin of the people being bludgeoned. And when that civil rights movement failed, then it turned to violence. Violence took over. And what struck me about the violence I saw is once it begins, no one knows where it's going to go. And the people who get injured, people who were killed, were overwhelmingly innocent people. They were not the troops, not the police, not the guys in the IRA. There were so often innocent people who got caught up in this maelstrom of violence.
What can the lessons of Ireland and the Troubles teach us about religious conflict?
There's one incident that stood out in my mind more than any other over there. I was in the book. There's a pub that was a real pub over there, the Long Bar on Leeson Street in the Lower Falls. I was in there with about 100 other men. I was in October afternoon, a beautiful autumn day in 1972. There was a football match on, a very big deal for the local guys. It was a real important football match, and we were all crowded in there watching it, when suddenly a woman ran through the door and screamed. And what she screamed was bomb. The Protestant paramilitary groups had come up to the front of the pub. They had a bomb in one car. They jumped in another car. They took off. They left that bomb at the front door of the Long Bar. And the bomb was gelignite. And when gelignite, before it explodes, it begins to smolder. There's little smoke. And that was happening. We could see that. So the bomb was at the front of the bar, and we all tried to run out the back. But the back door was padlocked shut. And the men in the bar, we just piled up on that back door, trying to get out. And when we realized with the bomb about to explode, we were trapped. All we could do was hit the floor. We got under tables, we got under chairs, we found any cover we could, and then there was just this explosion. It wasn't loud, but it was a concussion. You could feel it go through your chest cavity. And the ceiling came down, and there was screaming, and there was seconds of stunned silence. And then every man in that pub realized that his wife, or his daughter, or his mother, or his sister was out on that street, and he didn't know if they were dead, alive, or maimed. And every woman in that neighborhood knew her husband was inside that pub. She didn't know if her husband or son, father, nephew, whatever, was alive or dead. And there was this massive coming together of this female mob and this mob of men, and they just came together, and they looked like, if you've ever seen a group of ants, feeling their way through a group of ants. There was no communication, there was no shouting, there was no calling out of names. There's this crowd came together, and they just felt along, you're not, I don't know you, I don't know you, I don't know you, and then in an embrace, as people who loved one another, family members, found each other. And as we came out, there were people injured, there were people badly injured, there were people conscious, and there was one young woman across the street from the pub, slumped down on the sidewalk with a baby at her breast. The baby was fine. The young mother was dead. She had been hit in the head with a piece of metal from the car bomb, and she was dead. And the next night, I was at that woman's wake in a small Irish parlor. And Lillian McEwen, I stayed with, I lived with Lillian McEwen and her husband Jimmy, and I dedicated this novel to them. This woman was Lillian's cousin. And as I just stood there in this crowded small parlor, Lillian came up to me and she hugged me for coming, and she said, "Thank you." And she said to me, "My daddy says we can't lose this war because we have nothing to lose." And I always remembered that, and I always said, someday I have to write about this, because in religious conflict, when people are pressed down, whether it's a religious conflict or ethnic or racial, When people have nothing to lose, they still have an innate human dignity. They have a tremendous sense of who they are, of their heritage, of what they're all about. And as Harry Truman speaking on race relations, he said, if you're going to keep a man in the gutter, the only way to do it is get down in the gutter with him. And what we must remember in any of these conflicts, they don't spring out of whole cloth. People take desperate measures. People risk imprisonment without trial. They risk torture. They risk their lives because they're desperate, because they have been denied basic human rights, human dignity. And that's what I saw in Northern Ireland. That's what the Catholic minority, the nationalist minority was enduring, and that's the message. Treat people as human beings, and these things won't happen.
Thank you.